Hello and welcome to AviaDev Insight Africa, the podcast offering a window to the world of African aviation with your host, John Howell, CEO and founder of AviaDev Africa. Ahead of the AviaDev Africa online event, which takes place on the 9th and 10th of June 2021, we're delighted to bring back a great friend of AviaDev and of African aviation, who joined me back in episode 124. And that actually turned out to be our last live podcast and our last one pre-pandemic. We were hearing lots of rumors about this COVID thing, and we were at an event together. And 2 weeks later, it seemed like we were all locked down. Now, since then, Tom Perkins and the NavPass team have begun actually operating in the African market. And earlier this year, they started supporting South Sudan with improving their airspace safety and also collecting the air navigation fees on behalf of the government too. The NavPass solution has the possibility to be a game-changing, innovative solution that's going to support the rebuild and restart of African aviation. And that is what we aim to explore today. So welcome to the podcast, Tom, or should I say welcome back?
Wow, thank you. And good morning, good afternoon. I actually made it back to the States for a few days. So this is coming to you from Florida. Good to see you. Yeah, it's been quite an adventure since our last time together, as we sat around with bewilderment as to what was next. We had no idea, did we?
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, it's been through all of the challenges of the COVID adventure. We've continued to work, quite frankly. And I spent quite a bit of time in Africa. I actually decided to do lockdown in Africa last year after you and I saw each other in Addis. I ended up over there for almost 2.5 months before I came back to the States. So it was interesting watching the world from that perspective. It even gave me a better view of Africa, which I'm learning to kind of my second home these days. To jump in, NavPass is a technology that monetizes sovereign airspace. We have a very unique artificial intelligence that uses 12 sources of data that collects from 12 different sources of data to collect and follow aircraft through sovereign airspace. We have launched in several countries with a contract that we just finished in South Sudan. And with your permission, I'll jump in and chat about it because it brings in everything we've talked about previously into a real working environment. South Sudan we had some conversations with South Sudan 2 years ago, and then as we entered 2021, they found themselves at a crossroads to actually completing the process of pulling back their sovereign airspace. They had been granted the right in 2016 through ICAO. They had followed through on some of the paperwork, but quite frankly, then COVID hit and things stalled. So as they started to come out of COVID in 2021, ICAO was pushing them along to complete the process, and they were quite frankly short of resources, not only money, but technical resources. So we sat down with them early part of this year and crafted an agreement that's been quite extraordinary. We stepped in as NavPass, brought our ATC services team in, sat down with South Sudan Civil Aviation Authority, Captain Subek and Captain Stephen, and figured out where they were at, figured out what had to be accomplished to finish the return of their sovereign airspace, and then jumped in. And over a series of meetings in basically 60 days, we came up with a real solid plan to do that, as well as completing the majority of the paperwork that needed to be done and filed to allow South Sudan to take their airport. That included a continuous operations manual, an AIP, which is basically a guideline to how the Civil Aviation Authority would manage their airspace and allow everybody to look in and understand it. We developed a website in conjunction with South Sudan. Their South Sudan Civil Aviation's website is now up and running. We host it. We help them. We put everything online. I believe when it's done here and completely up before the 17th of June, it'll be one of the more advanced websites in the civil aviation world. So I encourage anybody to take a look at that. It's sscaa.aero. Everything's on there, all the paperwork, everything that we've worked with South Sudan Civil Aviation to stand up and complete. There's also a tremendous amount of training going on. So while South Sudan had sent off and trained a number of ATC workers. They hadn't finalized the training manual and some of the documentations to allow it to continue for many reasons, like COVID being one of them. So we got in and we helped them create a training manual. We've helped them pull everybody back forward. We're going through doing medicals. We're going through retraining all the ATC personnel that were there on a variety of things that have brought them up to speed. We've put all this online, so everybody who is wants to see what's going on in South Sudan can now see it online at the website. And we've just about completed the second round of training, which is what'll need to be happened before the 17 June deadline, which is the end of the air egg cycle when the airspace becomes official. So at that time, we'll have a complete contingent of ATC air traffic controllers set up and trained and ready to go. The airspace will officially, all the nodes and identifiers have been changed to make it South Sudan Civil Aviation, or South Sudan's airspace. So it's quite exciting. And the fact that we accomplished this in 120 days says a lot to the partnership. I can't say enough about South Sudan, the Civil Aviation Authority and the Minister of Transport, the ministers that have all been involved in this. They have really jumped in to put this through in record time. We've been told previously this takes 2 years to accomplish what we've done in about 120 days. So that collaboration was extraordinary.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's so much more than when we did the last podcast. We were talking about, collecting the overflight fees. What you've already told us there is it's like a rebuild or like a build from the ground up, and they've lent on you to support across the board. So let's kind of step back a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more about the overflight fees. Let's go back to that because, we talked about this last year. Governments, even then pre-COVID, were under pressure, and so were civil aviation authorities, to be able to fund making sure that their airspace was able to be secure and safe, and that their airports were able to operate in that way as well. And of course, they were looking for any kind of income that they could get. And with flights dropping, with the pandemic and the lockdowns, it wasn't coming from passenger revenue. It wasn't coming from airline revenue. So it was a really good time for the solution. So just to go back to that a little bit, tell us a bit about how did countries, not just in Africa, but around the world, before the NavPass technology, because you're here to solve the problem, how were they collecting overflight fees?
It's 80% manual. We've been in over 35 countries now and taken a look at how they're collecting navigation fees, the process associated with it, and it's a manual process, typically ran by out of the ATC operation where they're keeping track of the flights, and then they manually through a spreadsheet or paperwork processes through a system. Every system is a little bit different, and then there was an accounting part. And even the best of times before COVID, we didn't see much more than 50% being collected of when we analyzed the airspace. And what COVID did was the majority of that was obviously the big airlines, because they were the easiest to see, right? So guess who did all that traffic came way down. Now, the interesting thing about COVID is that as the airline passenger traffic came down, the cargo traffic sort of stayed up there. I mean, sure, it took a hit in the beginning, but it recovered very quickly. And then also private and government flights, and obviously NGOs and support UN operations also continued at the same pace previously. So what was going on with countries seeing the airlines dropped off, and then the rest of these flights, which tended to be the flights that weren't getting collected, continued. So the revenue dropped for the individual countries, even though the flights that were still happening were still using the airspace. So if it was collecting, let's just give an example of 50%, the airlines dropped off. So then they were collecting 10% of what was left. So the revenue just dried up. And with everything else that was going on, passenger tax, et cetera, they all faced shortfall. Every country we're talking to is facing a shortfall coming back out of COVID. And so is in an attempt to find revenue sources or ensure that all revenue sources are being collected, we've re-engaged with a number of countries. We're in advanced conversations now with a dozen countries to move forward with the technology. And it's when they finally see this and understand this, and it's a mix. We talked about it in a previous podcast. This is a new cloud-based technology. And anytime you're talking to people of my generation, 50, 60-year-old, that we're still living in the fact that that's, we're not caught up with technology. So it's a bit of a learning curve to understand how big of a leap you go from working in an Excel spreadsheet to a cloud-based technology that tracks airplanes by pinging them 3 times a second. I mean, that's a huge shift. And it's getting there now, but in the push realization to collect revenue, there's more of an appetite to learn.
Of course.
So it's more of a dialogue rather than okay, we're not sure what you're doing here, and we need to walk through our technical and security people to ensure that your technology isn't doing something that goes against how we're running the country. Well, there's more openness, and rightfully so. I mean, South Sudan now, because their airspace was not yet theirs, it was still being transitioned from Sudan. They didn't have a right to the fees. So because Sudan was still running the airspace, they were collecting the fees. Now, everything about the treaty and the split in between South Sudan, which was, again, Sudan was extraordinary to work with as well. They were nothing but helpful in this process and everything they did.
That's great.
The revenue dried up. So even the little tick boxes to say, okay, we're going to do this as we leave, Sudan said, well, check this. They were under enormous pressure because they didn't have the resources to even complete the agreement. So by us stepping in, working with South Sudan, putting together, not only collecting the fees for them, but we put together a public-private partnership as part of this. In that public-private partnership, which is owned by South Sudan, but governed by a board of private individuals, two civil aviation authority, and a number of technical and industry experts that represent the airlines. There's 2 of us on there from very strong technical backgrounds. IATA and ICAO are observing this with great interest. They're thrilled at what's going on. They see this moving at a pace that astonishes them. They see the paperwork and the processes that are put in place, which are the latest variation of what ICAO wants to see, which thrills them. So it's an extraordinary process. Now, when we took the fees and we looked at what was being charged by Sudan and the countries around it, using the ICAO doctrine, we came up with a formula that worked. Meaning that if you were going to fly through the entire airspace at the old fee, that the new fee was going to be about the same if you just transitioned South Sudan. Now, we went back with South Sudan, obviously the CEO of Civil Aviation, Captain Subek, very much interested in following this and using all the data we put in front of him, came up with a fee that works. It allows the budget in South Sudan to be covered through the PPP. It is a fee that is workable for the airspace based on what everybody's paying around. And it's very clear that the service that's going to be put in place for the fee is going to be a huge step up in safety and efficiency. And we're getting direct feedback constantly from the airlines now that they're over the moon with this.
So that begs the question. I'm glad you brought it to the airline side, because I think we addressed this last time, but the question I think the audience will be asking is, but wait a sec, the airlines were flying over airspace before this when it was manually being collected, and it was a bit hit and miss whether they'd get a bill or not, because it depended whether they got spotted. And now with your technology, every single time that they cross, they're going to get that. So are the airlines supportive of the technology, and what's in it for them in terms of their operation?
Well, they're supportive of the doctrine. They're supportive of the fact that they're going to pay a navigation fee that's then going to go into the safety and operation of air traffic control. It's a direct line. That PPP puts that money right back into that, and then we show them what's being invested. So in the case of South Sudan, we're going to put in GPS approaches into Juba, where currently they're not functioning because the ground equipment is no longer working, and the investment to bring it up is big. And again, ICAO's doctrine on a global basis is to get the navigation up to the GPS, get it off the ground. The airlines have been designed over the last 10 years to run off a very clear performance-based navigation, GPS-driven navigation system, including approaches, and that keeps all the equipment off the ground. The trouble with the equipment on the ground is maintenance, electricity. You know, we have trouble in all over the world with that. I mean, especially during COVID, the ILSs, the light bulbs were stolen, the copper was stolen. So it's a huge investment to keep that up. And under the new guidelines, you can do a very similar approach using GPS that you get with an ILS. So, and for a fraction of the cost, So they're thrilled, positively thrilled. We're putting in new SIDS and stars. We're doing new GPS approaches, and the airlines are directly involved in how that works. And they, under the performance-based navigation guidelines, it's a more efficient approach. It's safer and more efficient. So, I mean, the feedback's extraordinary, just extraordinary. They're all giving us feedback, and they're all thrilled to jump in. So they understand that the nav fee dollars are being directly invested into a safer airspace. So they're all thrilled.
And they're also, it improves their navigation as well. So they're not having the same fuel burn, and they're getting the optimal optimal route.
You know, and a couple of airlines that we work with in South Sudan, you know, because it was hit and miss on if the approach was up and running and the weather was marginal, it became a go, no go decision, which is, you know, that's not what they want to do. If it was a go decision, they had to put together a very extensive plan of options should the weather deteriorate. And that usually meant putting more fuel on the plane and pulling cargo and people off. Well, you know, in this environment, you don't want to leave a kilo or a person behind because that's dollars. So being able to rely on a consistent approach, being able to rely on the fact that they can fly it every day and down to pretty, if it's below 300 feet, there's a variety of things going on. They probably wouldn't go, but 300 feet is a great number, and they all greatly appreciate that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Just to pick up on the point you made as well, in terms of the kind of people that have been driving this, it's predominantly ministers of transport or civil aviation authority CEOs. It's at that level that you guys have been talking. Yes. How much of the technology and how much of the installation, you talked to us earlier about the South Sudan example and how quickly you've been able to put everything in place. Is that the norm, or is this just an extraordinary example of how quickly you can do it when there is will on that side of the table?
Yeah, absolutely. Is this the norm? Absolutely not. ICAO's gobsmacked at how fast this is moving, and how well it's coming together, and the level of change and safety that's occurring very, very quick. That's NavPass. I mean, when we have a collaboration like what we have with South Sudan, and there's clear dialogue. I mean, we are on the ground with a team all the time of between 3 and 12 people in South Sudan. So that dialogue is personal. It's going back and forth personal all day long about everything that we need to accomplish. And that allows us to move very, very quickly. And it would be a norm for us. I'm not sure it's a norm outside of that, but that can happen when there's collaboration. You're exactly right. And not only just between, minister level, the South Sudan Civil Aviation, but all the operators. I mean, we have a continuous stream dialogue going on with all the operators between NavPass and anything that's going on there. So they're constantly getting feedback about what's coming and what the changes are and how they're going to have to adapt. And it's right down to, their South Sudan will move towards being an ADS-B compliant airspace. There's a very clear path that every airplane in South Sudan will have to have ADS-B out. And you've understand what the world, that's been a tough pill for the world to digest, but they all want to. It was fascinating because we figured we'd get some feedback from some of the operators, tend to be older airplanes, correct? No feedback whatsoever. Everybody from every operator right on to the UN contracting agent who said, oh my God, fantastic. We want all of our airplanes to have ADS-B. So it's again, it has been an incredible collaboration.
That is great to hear. So that leads me to the question, where are we going to see NavPass next? Because I think you're doing a little bit of a safari around Africa. So, can you give us any enlightenment as to that?
It's going to be both South and North Africa, East and West. and it's coming quickly. I mean, as we are able to travel, I mean, it was funny because we wanted to do some meetings with ICAO, et cetera, in Nairobi. And of course, Nairobi's been up and down with COVID. So I think as things really open up here, we'll be able to conclude some deals. And they're done. I mean, I was on the phone this morning. They're essentially done now, but it's being able to move people and equipment in and finish it up and go. And then, of course, it's the classic story. It may have taken us 18 months to get the deal done, but can you start Tuesday, right? So here we come. So by the time I think the AviaDev, what are we, 20 days away, 15 days away? I think there'll be some more announcements for sure. There we go.
Yeah, absolutely, and that leads us quite nicely. So obviously you'll be with us at AviaDev, taking some meetings with our guys. And how can people? Obviously, they can meet you there. They're going to see the new advert that we've produced as well. But how can they find out a bit more about NavPass if they want to learn a little bit more?
Yeah, navpass.aero, and that's our website. There's all of our contacts on there. The info at navpass.aero goes to a number of people, and we all get to see it usually within a few hours of that coming in. And we've opened an office in Dubai, so it's rapidly filling up because that's going to support Africa. We've expanded everything in the customer service realm on the Western Hemisphere as well. So we're adapting to the fact that there's going to be a bit of a growth curve here that's going to be pretty interesting. So we're ready. Absolutely.
That's so exciting. And I do think it's not just Africa, but you need a pioneer, which is obviously South Sudan in this case. And when its neighbors and its allies see the benefits, and obviously the airlines see the money being reinvested, and everybody sees the benefit, and you've got the support of the big associations, then it is literally the sky is the limit, to coin a cliche, I suppose. So thank you so much for your time, Tom. We're going to follow the story obviously very closely, and thank you for your support for AviaDev and what we're trying to do, because obviously the big secret here, and I think something that fits quite nicely with NavPass as well, is we really want to inspire and support intra-African connectivity. It's just not there. You've traveled the continent extensively. You know how difficult it is to get around, and if we can make this easier and safer and more secure and all of the other things that we need, it's in everybody's interest. So thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Absolutely, John. And our relationship with AviaDev and you, John, has been extraordinary. This has turned into a partnership, and it's a partnership of passion and legacy. We really want to, we see Africa as not only our second home, but we really see tremendous opportunity in empowering the people. So our alignment is fantastic. And I greatly appreciate everything that you do.
Oh, that's really, really kind of you, Tom. And thank you so much. And thank you everybody out there as well for listening to today's episode. Don't forget, it's not too late to register for AviaDev. You can head over to the website, aviationdevelop.com/Africa. It's completely free to attend. We've got some incredible sessions lined up, lots of networking, breakout, speed networking, lots of really cool things. Yes, it's not the same as us being together in Madagascar, but we will do our best to bring Madagascar to you. And there's plenty more insightful podcasts planned. We're not going anywhere even after the event. So thank you all for listening. Thank you again, Tom, for joining us. And we'll see you all for the next episode very soon.